Oh! Hello, fellow film fans. Today I'll be reviewing the new film A Real Pain, written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg, and which came out last week in limited release and is still in theaters. As usual, this review will contain spoilers. A Real Pain, the sophomore feature from Jesse Eisenberg, follows two cousins reuniting for a pilgrimage to Poland to honor their recently passed grandmother. Because she was a Jewish Holocaust survivor from Lublin, their trip includes a guided tour of Jewish and Holocaust history, starting in Warsaw, then on to Lublin and the nearby Majdanek camp, to whence Jews were deported for extermination from the Lublin ghetto. I had special expectations for this movie because I took a similar trip to Poland with my dad a few years ago, and was honestly looking forward to reliving that to a degree. We visited Auschwitz and Treblinka, and like David and Benji, toured many of the same monuments and locations in Warsaw, and in our case, Krakow. Eisenberg presents the movie as a life-changing experience for perhaps both the cousins, but never delivers on that. The movie effortlessly vacillates between being laugh-out-loud funny, somber when it needs to be, and oftentimes uncomfortable, and the characters are well drawn and performed, but it still left me feeling empty. By the end, we've seen no real revelations, no reckonings, no deeper understandings. They're neither closer emotionally nor farther apart. When they part ways, they may as well have been grabbing a coffee together. It has all the markings of a heavy buddy / road trip movie, but none of the outcome. It may or may not be fair, but stories like this bring certain expectations. Was Cameron the same after spending even just one day playing hooky with Ferris?
I can't wait to see the look on the bastard's face.
Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin played David and Benji respectively, who were virtual brothers when they were younger but have since grown apart. They're a perfect odd couple because David has responsibilities and is a little tightly wound, while Benji may or may not even have a home, is spontaneous, flippant, and unfiltered, and has no check on his emotions. He's the type who will light up any room he enters, then proceed to shit all over it. David clearly cares about his cousin and has a certain amount of guilt that not only have they not stayed closely connected, but that he's also lost touch with how to consistently and emotionally be supportive for him. It pains him that he wasn't around at Benji's lowest moment, but it's also clear that he has his own life to lead, and like most of us, his emotional bandwidth is finite. David has a wife and a young kid and a good job selling internet ads, all of which are staples in a conventional life for which Benji has no capacity nor desire. Benji shows little to no interest in David's family and mocks David for holding a job selling something everyone hates. David's canned retort that the web as we know it wouldn't exist without those pestilent ads is a nice little insight into his character. At one point, David asks Benji what he's going to do after the trip, and Benji romanticizes about a friend's house he's helping renovate. David digs a little deeper, pointing out that Benji's only talking about someone else's house and life, not his own. Benji simply moves on to the next subject. Their first stop is in Warsaw, where they meet up with the tour group to look for the last remaining fragments of the ghetto wall and monuments of the uprising. These early scenes highlight the cinematography by Warsaw-born Michael Dymek. He creates a vividly real sense of place, whether they're in a hotel room, in traffic on an expressway, or touring a town, city, or even a concentration camp. But in Warsaw in particular, he starts with a terrific montage of the city's architecture. Not the modern architectural masterpieces or centuries-old landmarks, Warsaw has plenty of both, but the everyday facades of apartment buildings, high-rises, and other nondescript buildings. It's a perspective of Warsaw that would likely ring familiar for someone who's lived there or visited. Dymek and Eisenberg paint the city as one that has grown up reluctantly around the inconveniences of the past. This is my biggest takeaway from my aforementioned trip to Poland, and Dymek captures it brilliantly. Remnants of the war are preserved and memorialized, but seemingly with as little reverence as possible. Sparse sections of the ghetto wall are mixed in and hidden behind mazes of modern development. Memorials are tucked away on side streets, down hidden alleys. The Umschlagplatz, where Jews were forced to gather before being deported to Treblinka, could pass for a bus stop. One could walk past most of these things on a daily basis without noticing them, and in reality, it seems like they do. They're given just enough reverence to make their existence acknowledgeable. Poland in general might be unique, as the events in that country with the most historical relevance to the outside world were perpetrated by occupiers against a people largely hated and subsequently almost entirely erased from the map. Poland had a population of nearly 3.5 million Jews before World War II. Today it's somewhere just north of 10,000. In one sense, Poland wants to distance themselves from the atrocities of the Holocaust, and still do to this day. On the other, considering how anti-Semitic Poland was at the time, and still is to this day, one can get the impression that for them, worse things could have happened. If you ever watched Shoah, which was life-changing for me, that sentiment among local Poles is clear and pervasive. Poland, like most other European countries, including France, the Netherlands, Hungary, Ukraine, did their part to aid and abet the Germans. Even when we first see Majdanek, we see the buildings of Lublin looming nearby. The same held true for Auschwitz when I saw it. I can imagine being a prisoner at Birkenau, the deepest of hells on earth, and seeing the town of Oswiecim going about its business. The city itself was rebuilt after the war, literally with materials from the ruins of Auschwitz-Birkenau. As they leave Warsaw for Lublin by train, Benji's emotional troubles and the film's flaws take the forefront. Benji is increasingly uncomfortable with sitting in a luxury car, eating first-class food while they hurtle down the same tracks that likely transported countless innocent people, mostly Jews, to their collective murder. First he yells about it, shaming himself and everyone in the group. Then he lashes out with personal attacks at anyone who tries to calm him down. He storms out of the car, David eventually follows him, and the heart-to-heart ensues. This happens again later at a restaurant in Lubin's Jewish quarter, where he's triggered by David accidentally relaying their grandmother's view of third-generation survivors as losers who live in their mom's basements and do drugs all day. For some crazy reason, he takes that personally. It leads to another embarrassing tirade, then he storms out again. A dumbfounded David, still at the table with the tour group, breaks down into his own tearful soliloquy about how hard it is to maintain a relationship with his cousin and his apparent bipolar disorder. That's my diagnosis, to be sure. The problem with both of these scenes and all of the meltdowns is that they go beyond what anyone would ever expect to see in reality. Benji or David would more likely make it clear they're upset, say one or two things that would cause the discomfort for which Eisenberg was aiming, then storm out, saving the monologue for a more private time, even if it's immediately afterward a few cars down the train. Instead of being cringe moments that tell us just how troubled Benji is or how helpless David feels when dealing with him, they're too far-fetched to be relatable. I thought of Swingers when Mike leaves about 30 too many messages for a girl he just met.
It's only been 6 months.
Mike?
Nikki, great. Did you just walk in, or were you listening all along?
Don't ever call me again.
Wow.
It's cringe because it's relatable. A scene where Eisenberg handles this a little more deftly is when Benji lashes out at the tour guide for continuously rambling about statistics while they're at the oldest cemetery in Poland. It helps that his criticism is correct, but this episode is more measured than the others and stays within the realm of reality. It also leads to a nice horseshoe moment at the end when the guide thanks Benji for the criticism, explaining that he was resistant to it at first, but eventually took it to heart. Benji responds by not remembering any of it, which tells us a lot about him. With his brutal honesty, he has the ability to have lasting impacts on the lives of people he barely knows. But it comes from a place of torment, so the emotional connections from his end are fleeting. Another aspect of the picture that I struggled with was the music. Eisenberg fittingly calls on Chopin piano pieces throughout, played by Zvi Erez. As beautiful as they are, Eisenberg uses them too often to the point that it gives the film a monotonous feeling. The most egregious example of this derails one of the movie's most poignant moments. After leaving the Majdanek camp, site of the murder of nearly 80,000 innocent people, including approximately 18,000 Jews who were shot just outside the camp as part of the infamous Harvest Festival, Eisenberg cuts all sound and brings us inside the van in complete silence. The tour group is appropriately contemplative, as are we, since we took the tour with them and Eisenberg filmed it with perfect sensitivity. Just as we enter the van and bask in the silence, the piano music comes in, jolting us out of the moment. In that same category of A Little Goes a Long Way is Culkin. I grew to love him in succession, but it turns out a little of him goes a long way. He was perfect for this role, but he was also grating and grew more so as the film went on. Part of it is likely the material and how unreal it sometimes felt, but a bigger part of it is Culkin's singular, sarcastic, smartest person in the room note. He carried that throughout Succession and is more of the same in A Real Pain. Eisenberg, on the other hand, was a pleasant surprise. I've always liked him, but here, even though he's somewhat playing the type, a little neurotic, a little insecure, it never feels typecast. His character is grounded, and those quirks, while present, sit comfortably in the background as if he were a real grown-up who's been able to manage his idiosyncrasies rather than become defined by them. His writing and directing were also a nice surprise. I never saw When You Finish Saving the World, but in A Real Pain, all the characters, down to the other members of the tour, are clearly defined and three-dimensional, so much so that it sometimes feels like a documentary. A Real Pain would have worked a lot better if Eisenberg hadn't tried so hard to create those high-drama moments, and instead focused more on the lasting impact this trip would have had on both the cousins. Without the emotional weight inherent to the places they're seeing, A Real Pain doesn't bring much to the table. So, those are my thoughts on Jesse Eisenberg's A Real Pain. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a like. If you like my channel's content, feel free to subscribe. If you have anything to say or want to start a conversation, please feel free to drop a comment below. I'll try to respond to everybody. Otherwise, thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.